The Story of the Steam Badger, written by Lamenda Kingdon, read by Venkat. Once upon a time, there was a mean, miserable, impatient, crotchety old man who lived in a poorly kept hut at the top of a hill. The hut was surrounded by magnificent countryside. Beautiful green woodland covered the hill slopes all the way down to a bubbling mountain river that ran through the valley below. Did this mean the miserable, crotchety old man appreciate the beauty of his surroundings? He did not. He had dropped into a very bad habit of thinking negatively. He grumbled about anything that came into his mind, day in and day out. This man was a pessimist. He was not a good company to be with, and it is no surprise that people no longer bothered to climb the hill to visit this man. On a wet, windy and grey day, he had just woken up, grumbling to himself about his aches and pains. It had been raining overnight, and the morning was cold, damp, and the sky was overcast. He decided to light a fire and make himself a warm drink. He quickly lit the fire and hung a pot of water over it. He sat by his fireside and watched and waited for his pot of water to boil. There's a well-known saying in England, a watched pot never boils. But the old man sat, bent over, watching the pot hanging over the fire. He was muttering and mumbling to himself about the water taking so long to boil. He said to himself, "This water is taking ages this morning." Eventually, the water did start to steam, and he thought, "At last." As he looked through the steam, he thought he saw a creature. Was he dreaming? Had he spent too many years alone and started to go mad? He thought he could see what looked like a badger. Yes, he could see the long black and white striped head of a badger. The badger lifted his head up and first put one paw and then another paw over the edge of the pot and suddenly sprang out. The badger stood up on his hind legs with steam rising from his wet fur. The badger shook himself dry and started to dance a little jig. He danced, springing from one foot to another. First he crossed his right back leg in front of his left back leg, and then his left back leg in front of his right back leg. As he danced, he started to sing in a rich, deep baritone voice. He sang, "Hello, I'm the steam badger. I'm here to play, I'm here to play. And I'm here for a year and a day. Hello, I'm the steam badger." The old man was shocked. Had the years of being on his own sent him completely mad? But no, this badger was real. The wet patch on the floor was real, and no doubt the badger's intention to play and stay for a year and a day was real too. The old man did not want the steam badger playing, dancing and making his hut wet. "I do not want you here playing and dancing and singing and making my hut wet. Go away!" he shouted at the steam badger. The steam badger stopped singing and dancing. The steam badger looked surprised and then despondent. The steam badger checked that he had heard the old man correctly. Don't you want me to sing, dance and play? Don't you want me to stay for a year and a day?" asked the steam badger. "No, I do not," the old man replied. With that, the steam badger seemed to instantly evaporate, and it was only visible jumping back into the pot. Now, just at that moment, as luck would have it, a tinker, a rag and bone man who trudged the ancient countryside, ringing a bell and crying out loud, "Rag and bone, rag and bone, rag and bone," could be heard coming up the hill through the woodland. Between each cry, he'd ring his old bell. The mean, miserable, and crotchety man immediately thought of a cunning plan. He would give the pot with its unwanted steam badger to the tinker, and that is exactly what he did. When the tinker reached the hut and knocked on the door for any rags or bones, the mean old man was ready with a pot, which, through a half-opened door, he thrust it into the tinker's hand. But being the mean old man that he was, he told the tinker he wanted the pot returned to him in precisely 1 year and 1 day. The tinker, who never missed an opportunity, agreed that he would return the pot precisely in 1 year and a day. So off went the rag and bone man, happy that he had been given this lovely big pot for a year and a day. The rain and the wind had stopped, and there was a warm sunshine. He had enjoyed the climb up the hill, and before walking down again, he stopped to look at one of the most beautiful views in all the land. He could see the bubbling river in the valley below. He decided that he would use his new pot to get some water from the river and make himself a cup of tea on the river bank. As he walked down through the wooded hillside, he swung his old bell in one hand and his new pot in the other. He felt it was good to be alive on this day, listening to the sound of the birds and seeing the pretty woodland flowers. When he got to the side of the river, he quickly made a little fire and then dipped the pot into the flowing water and put it into the flaming and crackling fire to heat. He sat on the bank at the side of the river, waiting for the water to boil. While he was waiting, he watched a trout swimming in the shallow waters of the river. There were cows in the meadow nearby and sheep on the distant hills. Eventually, steam started rising from his new pot. The tinker rubbed his eyes. Was he dreaming? Was there really a creature in this pot? He could hardly believe his eyes as he saw what he looked like a badger. Yes, the black and white striped head was unmistakable. Just like before, the steam badger lifted his head up and popped out, first one paw and then the other, before leaping out of the pot and starting to dance his jig and sing in his deep, rich baritone voice. "Hello, I'm the steam badger. I'm here to play. I'm here to play. And I'm here to stay for a year and a day. Hello, I'm the steam badger." The tinker's reaction to the steam badger was very different to that of the mean old man at the top of the hill. The tinker thought that the steam badger was enchanting. He gently took one of the badger's front paw and they danced a jig together on the banks of that sparkling river. The tinker and the steam badger were both happy to have found a new friend in each other. After their dance, the tinker made his warm drink. He sat on the river bank, sipping his drink, whilst the steam badger happily rolled over from side to side on his back. Soon it was time for the tinker to start making his way to the next village. The village people would be expecting him to come and collect their old dragon bones. The steam badger held on to the tinker's hands as they danced off together towards the next village. The children were the first to see the tinker hand in paw with the steam badger walking towards the village. Some ran off to tell their friends. Soon a crowd of children had gathered to see such an unusual sight. The steam badger was not at all shy and started to sing and dance for this new audience. The children clapped and cheered with delight. Adults, wondering what all the fuss was about, started to gather around and see what was going on. They were amazed at the sight of a badger dancing and singing, and they started to clap and join in with the steam badgers singing and dancing as well. News about the singing and dancing steam badger soon travelled to the nearby villages as well. By the time the tinker and the badger arrived at the next village, people were waiting for them. And when they moved on to the other village, the people were running out to meet them. Now, it was at this time the king and queen of the land were growing very concerned about their daughter's welfare. Their daughter, the princess, was 21 years old and had been very beautiful, rosy-cheeked princess before she had been struck by a severe melancholy. Now her face was pale grey, her eyes dull and sunken. Her head drooped down towards her chest in a very sad way. She hadn't smiled for many months. Her loving parents decided that as the well-being of their daughter was more important than any of their possessions, they would offer their kingdom as a reward to anyone who would cure their daughter of this melancholy. The tinker heard about the king and queen's offer and decided to go and see them in their castle. He felt sure that the steam badger's singing and dancing would cure the princess. He and the steam badger, paw in hand, danced all the way to the royal castle. When they reached the castle's huge golden gate, the badger jumped back into the pot. The tinker walked up the long path to the grand entrance with the steam badger in the pot, which was swinging from his hand. The tinker reached out to the door knocker and made 2 loud knocks. The door slowly opened. There was a tall, thin butler who looked like a penguin in his black suit and white shirt. The butler looked down at the tinker and in a tight-throated voice rudely asked, "What do you want?" Without waiting for a reply, the butler started to close the door in the tinker's face. "Oh, wait a minute!" The tinker cried out, and he pushed the door wide open to make enough space for him to quickly slip past the butler. He ran towards the 3 royal people who could see sitting on their thrones down at the end of a long corridor. The king and queen were much more polite to the tinker than their butler had been. They listened when the tinker asked for their permission to make for a small fire to heat up the water in his pot. He explained to them that this would provide the cure for their daughter's melancholy. The king and queen had seen so many people offering strange cures for their daughter's melancholy. Among them were doctors, but to no avail. This tinker, with his request to heat a pot of water, was the most extraordinary of all. Nothing else had helped their daughter, so they thought they might as well allow the tinker to heat his pot. The head of the princess, with a pale grey face and dull eyes, was leaning towards on one side with a look of great boredom and mystery. The steam started to rise from the pot, and just like before, the badger began to appear. First, his head popped up above the rim of the pot, then one front paw, and then the other hung over from the edge. The princess opened her eyes wide. She lifted her head up in surprise when the steam badger sprang out of the steaming pot. When the steam badger started to dance his jig, there was the slightest twitch of a smile in one corner of her mouth. When he sang in his rich baritone voice, the twitch started to spread into a wide smile and then a giggle. She seemed to have forgotten her melancholy, and she stepped down from her throne and joined the badger in a dance. The king and queen were overjoyed to see that at last that their daughter had finally been cured of her melancholy. The king and queen were pleased to offer the tinker the reward of all the land in their kingdom for curing their daughter's melancholy. The tinker replied, "Your royal majesties, I thank you for your kindness and generous offer of all the land in your kingdom. But I have no need for your land. I am not a king to rule over the country, and you have much more experience in that. But on the other hand, I've fallen in love with your beautiful daughter, the princess, and I would ask that instead of all the land in your kingdom, I have the hand of your daughter in marriage." The king and queen knew deep in their hearts that this tinker would love and care for their daughter. The princess also fell in love with the tinker in the meantime. So the king and queen were happy to agree for this royal wedding. The couple were married the very next week. After the ceremony and the celebrations, the princess, the tinker, and the steam badger danced off to the very next village, where they delighted the villagers with the steam badgers singing and dancing. So, this is how the princess, the tinker, and the badger lived happily, traveling from village to village, sharing their joy of life with the others. That is until it was time to return the pot back to the mean old man at the top of the beautiful wooded hill. On the day that was precisely 1 year and 1 day from the day the tinker promised to return the pot, the princess, the steam badger, and the tinker danced their way up to the beautiful hill. At the top, the tinker, the princess, and the badger stopped to look for the last time together at the fabulous view across the valley. They reflected on and were grateful for the happy days and joyful time they had spent together during the last year. Then the steam badger disappeared into the pot. The tinker drew a deep breath as he knocked on the wooden door of the old man's hut. The mean old man pulled the door half open and reached out for his pot with his skinny arm. Without a word of thanks, he snatched his pot back and slammed the door shut. The princess and the tinker turned to make their way back down towards the valley. Once again, the tinker rang his bell and started to cry out, "Rag and bone! Rag and bone!" as they started to make their way back down the hill towards the next village. Although they knew that their life would be very different without the steam badger, they still had their love for each other and the love of their life together.